Hello everybody, my name is Iceberg Lettuce, and today we are here in Minecraft 1.17, and we're going to be making a tier list. A tier list of what? Well, you read the thumbnail. We're going to be making a tier list of every single new Minecraft 1.17 farm. There's a lot of new features that have gotten added in this update, and with them, a lot of new farms that we're going to get to build once the update comes out fully. So, I'm excited for that, and I thought it'd be fun to, make a tier list to pass the time. Oh, and by the way, if a farm ends up on D tier or F tier, that doesn't mean I think it's bad, just that, maybe it's not my favorite. So, I'm not dissing the Minecraft developers or anything. Also, we're going to be ranking these based off of a few different categories, just how much fun it is to build, as well as how useful it is or interesting the new gameplay mechanics are. So without any further ado, let's get into the tier list. So the first one I've got here is Amethyst farms, and these ones are going to go pretty solidly in the B tier. They're kind of a mixed bag on categories, so I would say in terms of how interesting they are, they get a lot of points because, finding an amethyst geode and waiting for them to grow from budding amethyst, that's fun and all. But honestly, they're just way too annoying to automate. There's no really good way to make an automated amethyst farm because observers don't really work on them and they generate randomly, so it's hard to get the redstone in. So overall, I think it averages out to about a B tier. They're pretty interesting, but, not super fun to build. Next up, we've got copper farms, and this one is going to go pretty low on the list for me, mostly just because I really don't think the way they've done this is super interesting or, good, because trying to get a lot of copper is something you're going to want to do if you want to build with this block. But, you only get a copper very rarely from drowned, and converting zombies into drowned just isn't really the most interesting mechanic in the world. I thought it would be way more interesting if this was a common drop for husks, which would give husks a use, as well as making copper more common and easy to farm. So that's what I would have done, but as it stands, I would put copper farming in the D tier. Next up, lava farming, and this one is going to go way up here in A tier, not only just because finally lava is farmable, but also because I just think this is a really interesting mechanic. Using dripstone and having it drip into cauldrons gives some uses to some underused blocks, as well as just being, a new interesting way to farm something. So, not much to say about that. It's just a really solid farm idea, and it's really fun to make a big scale version of it. So that one's going up in the A tier. Another good farm coming up here, Shulker shell farms. This one you might have forgotten even exists. I know I forgot it existed, but this was added back in the very first 1.17 snapshot. You are now able to farm shulker shells, and you can do that by having one shulker hit another shulker with a bullet, and sometimes it will duplicate, which is just super weird and super fun and super interesting, and I love it a whole lot. The reason this is going in A tier instead of S tier, however, is I do think it's a little complicated. I don't think any just normal Minecraft players who aren't super into automating things are going to be able to figure out how to do this sort of farm because it's just way too technical and hard to get right. Transporting shulkers and stuff is just, way too difficult. So overall, if I was doing it, I would have made shulker farming a little bit more accessible, but other than that, it's a super interesting farm, so that one's going up in A tier. Next up, powder snow, and I don't really know how to feel about powder snow. I'm thinking this one is going to go maybe in the B tier. It's pretty similar to lava farming in that you're waiting for a cauldron to fill up, but this one is a lot less fun, I think, just because you have to wait for it to rain, which is just totally randomized and, not super fun to wait for it to rain. And other than that, it's really just a giant open field of cauldrons, but it is an interesting mechanic, I will give it that, which is why it's not lower. Next up, we've got dripstone farming, and this one is another one that I'm going to say is a solid B tier overall. I do like the idea of waiting for dripstone to grow because water is dripping down it, because that's how stalactites grow in real life, and I think that's really cool. But other than that, it's kind of just another wait for something to grow and then break it with a piston sort of farm, so not super fun or interesting, but it is a pretty cool mechanic, and, that's how it works in real life, so, I can't really fault them on that, so this one's going in B tier. Next up is axolotl farming. I don't really know why I put this here, but technically you can farm axolotls if you want to. You could breed them, or you could just make a thing that spawns them. This one's gonna go in D tier because, Honestly, I don't really like the underground water mob spawning rules that much because they spawn inside of bubble columns, which honestly just makes this more of an annoying thing than a nice feature. And plus, why would you even farm axolotls? They don't really do that much. You just breed a couple of them. You don't really need to farm them, so not very useful, not super interesting. That one's going in D tier. And now we're up to Big Drip Leaf, and this one is going in F tier, sadly, because in case you're unaware, the way you farm drip leaves is just you get a big drip leaf, and then you bone meal it, and then you break it. And then you bone meal it again, and you break it. And there's like 500 farms like that, even on this list, so we'll see in a second, but yeah, not super interesting. Next up we got Glow Lichen, which is another one of those just a bone meal it and it grows farms that I talked about. Although, actually, you know, kind of thinking about it, I think I'm going to move this one up to D tier, maybe? Because, okay, in the previous snapshot, I probably would have put this in F tier, but now they've added a new feature where you can, if you have multiple glow lichens in the same spot, you can break both of them at the same time using only one shear's durability, which does give it a little bit of an interesting edge, you know, at least enough to bump it up from F tier, but still not super interesting or anything, so yeah, that one's not going super high. Okay, so next up is Glowberries, and I think this one is going in the C tier, maybe? I'm stuck between C and D tier. I do think farming glowberries is at least a little bit interesting if you do it in a good way, because there are quite a few different ways to farm glowberries. There's not just one way. You can either bone meal the vines, or you can wait for them to grow if you don't want to use bone meal, or you can even use foxes to collect them. So that's enough to bump it up from D tier, in my opinion. None of these ways on their own are super interesting, but the fact that there are so many different ways to farm glowberries does, you know, give it a little bit of an interesting edge. Okay, finally we've made it to a farm that I really, really like, which is moss blocks, and I think this is going to be our very first S tier, because in case you're unaware, I really, really like building moss block farms. I just think the mechanics with the moss block are so interesting. Being able to push stone in, convert it, then you break it, then you bone meal it to convert even more of it. It's just super fun and satisfying to build. You can build these huge contraptions that just generate bone meal and moss blocks, and they're so useful for building and stuff. And I just love this block so much on its own, but the new interesting farming mechanics genuinely make this, I think, probably my favorite feature of 1.17, so that's definitely going up in S tier. Next up, I have an Azalea bush here, and this is supposed to represent the new farms where you can bone meal an Azalea tree, and it will grow into a big Azalea tree, and it will have some logs that you can break and some leaves you can get. And this one, I think, is going in A tier, solely because it enables you to do fully automatic, no player input oak log farming now, because you can bone meal some moss, it has a chance to grow an azalea, you can bone meal the azalea, and then you can get the logs out of that, so that's really cool. Plus, I really like the textures of the leaves on these things, and, you know, it's just a new way to farm something, and I think it's a really cool mechanic, so that one's going up in A tier at the very least. There's nothing bad about it, but I wouldn't put it in S tier, just because I don't really think it's super duper accessible, similarly to the Shulker box farms. It's not super understandable how you can farm this, and there's just so many steps that it's kind of hard to design your own. Next up, we've got the Glow Ink Sac, and I don't know what to say about this thing. It's just kind of there, I guess. I guess C tier? I mean, really all you do is you just build some water underground and you kill them. There's not really any downsides to it, and it's not super boring, but it's not super interesting either. So, yeah, C tier, I guess. Sure, why not? Next up, we got Hanging Roots, and this one is sadly yet another one going in F tier because it's just another you bone meal it and it grows thing. You just bone meal some rooted dirt and it grows one of these. Not interesting. And lastly, we have goats, because technically you can use wheat to farm goats. That's not really a farm, like an automatic farm, and I guess that's gonna go in D tier, I guess? I don't know. I mean, it's not super boring or anything to farm them, and, you know, they're kind of fun to try and pen, but, like, you know, what are you gonna use a goat for? They don't really do anything. Alright, looking over this thing, are there any changes that I want to make? I think copper maybe deserves to be moved up a spot. It's not that bad. I think I was a little bit harsh to copper. I mean, it's not super fun or anything, but you know, it's fine. I just wish it was faster. And, let's think here. I'm thinking I'm going to move lava up to S tier, honestly. I feel like, you know, moss just kind of needs a friend, and, you know, I wouldn't say this as good as moss, maybe, but I do think the lava farms do have a sort of beauty in their simplicity that just makes them really fun. So, yeah, okay, I'm pretty satisfied with this list. So was I super right, or did I get literally everything wrong and I'm an idiot? Make sure to let me know down in the comments below. Also, if you want to, maybe you could leave a like or subscribe or something like that, you know, if you want to. So that's all I have to say about this, so I hope you all enjoyed watching, and see you next time, everybody. Bye.